welcome to US History. We are covering Chapter 4 in this film. This film covers, in Chapter 4, the politics of slavery, a country divided, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and the recovery after the Civil War. This was a very hard time in history, and there were a lot of arguments over whether or not slavery was okay. The first part of this video will be Tristan talking about the politics of slavery, which are still an issue today. Now we have Tristan to talk about the politics of slavery.
Oh, what? Hello. The politics of slavery aren't as complicated as one may assume they are. Slavery has been around almost since the beginning of humankind. It has always been about the big, powerful bullies pushing around the weaker people to do their bidding. Slavery has involved all kinds of races and ethnicities, not just black people. In fact, even some white people have been enslaved in the past, mainly as a form of paying off a debt. However, in America, slavery was based off the notion that Americans believed that white people were vastly superior to the African Americans.
Americans abused the African people ever since they were shipped to America. People in the U.S. used African slaves like animals. Slaves faced harsh journeys as they were taken from their homeland and were forced to board ships which carried them across the ocean from Africa to America. They were treated in horrible, cruel ways. We could go on for hours on this topic, but we have much more to cover. Over to you, Casey.
Now that Tristan has described the politics of slavery to us, it's time to talk about a country divided. The country is very divided because the politics of slavery were and always have been a very controversial topic. An example of the politics of slavery during this time period before the Civil War was a Supreme Court case featuring Dred Scott. He was a slave owner who took his slave from the South in Missouri up to Illinois and Wisconsin, which were, at the time, free states. In the Dred Scott case, it was ruled that it is okay for slave owners to take their slaves from slave states, such as Missouri, to free states, such as Illinois or Wisconsin, for example, which was in the Dred Scott case, back to slave states. It was ruled that this was okay because of the Fifth Amendment, which protects property, which at the time included slaves. However, this was very controversial, and this was ruled most likely because the people who were in the Supreme Court were pretty much rich white men who also owned slaves. Not everybody agreed on the decision from the Dred Scott court case. Some people thought that if the slave owner took the slave to a free state, the slave should be freed. This was pretty much a foreshadow of the Civil War to come. And the country became so divided that it was inevitable that the Civil War would break out. Now that we have established the causes of the Civil War, what was the Civil War?
The Civil War was a war, yes, a war, that was fought from 1861 to 1865. Why was it fought? It was fought over the issue of slavery. It started because of the uncompromising differences about whether the government should prohibit slavery or not. The incoming Lincoln administration of most of the Southern people refused to recognize the legitimacy of secession. The Battle of Gettysburg is a prime example of a rough battle during the Civil War. It was fought on July 1st through 3rd, 1863. The battle was fought between Union and the Confederate troops and involved the largest amount of casualties in one battle in the entire war. In the spring of 1865, all the principal Confederate armies surrendered, thus ending the war. That's about covers it. On to you, Zoe.
At the end of May 1865, President Andrew Johnson announced his plans for Reconstruction. In Johnson's view, the Southern states had never given up their right to govern themselves, and the federal government had no right to determine voting requirements or other questions at the state level. All land had been confiscated by the Union Army and distributed to the freed slaves by the Army or the Freedmen's Bureau. Apart from being required to uphold the abolition of slavery, swearing loyalty to the Union, and paying off their war debt, Southern states were given free rein to rebuild themselves. As a result of Johnson's leniency, many Southern states successfully made a series of laws known as the Black Codes. Codes were designed to restrict free blacks' activity. These repressive codes enraged many in the North, including numerous members of Congress. In early 1866, Congress passed the Freedmen's Bureau and Civil Rights bills and sent them to Johnson for his signature. The bill defined all persons born in the United States as national citizens who were to enjoy equality before the law. After Johnson vetoed the bills, causing a permanent dismemberment of his relationship with Congress that would lead to his impeachment in 1868, the Civil Rights Act became the first major bill to become law over presidential veto. Republicans in Congress took firm hold of Reconstruction in the South. The following March, again over Johnson's veto, Congress passed the Reconstruction Act of 1867, which temporarily divided the South into 5 military districts and outlined governments based on universal suffrage. The law also required Southern states to ratify the 14th Amendment, which broadened the definition of citizenship before they could rejoin the Union. Congress approved the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed a citizen's right to vote that would not be denied on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude in February 1869. By 1870, all the former Confederate states had been admitted to the Union, and the states' constitutions during the years of radical Reconstruction were most progressive in Southern history. African American participation in South public life after 1867 would be the most radical development of the Reconstruction. African Americans won election in Southern state governments, and even in the U.S. Congress during this period. The Reconstruction brought about the South's first state-funded public school systems, more taxation in legislation, laws against racial discrimination, and ambitious economic development programs.
The Civil War started because of uncompromising differences between the free and slave states over the power of the national government. The Confederate and Union states wanted control of the abolition of slavery in the territories that had not yet become states. When Abraham Lincoln won the presidential election in 1860 as the first Republican president on the platform pledging to keep slavery out of the territories, 7 slave states in the Deep South succeeded and formed a new nation, the Confederate States of America. The Southern States Confederacy consisted of South and North Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, and Tennessee. The Union was made up of 24 northern states.
That's all, folks.